everyone. I believe we're going to get started. My name is John Conley, Program Officer with LISC Safety. Welcome to today's webinar, CPTED for the 21st Century. I'm joined by Ryan, Senior Program Director for LISC Safety, and our two presenters, who I'll introduce in a moment. This is sponsored by LISC, Law Initiative Support Corporation, as the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Program, which is by the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance. Now, fourth year, the Byrne Criminal Justice Innovation Program, also known as BCJI, is supporting comprehensive efforts to reduce crime and spur revitalization in over 60 of the nation's most distressed neighborhoods. And a quote about audio: all of the attendees' lines will be muted during the presentation. We'll encourage you to ask questions utilizing the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll do our best to get to those questions at the end of the presentation during our Q&A of the discussion. BCA is part of BCA's smart suite of programs that utilize research practitioner partnerships to implement data-driven approaches to crime and improve community safety. National Comprehensive Community Development Support Organization, and serve as the training and technical assistance provider for BCJI. That help distinguish BCJI are its emphasis on comprehensive cross-sector strategies that enhance neighborhood safety, and its partnership with subject matter experts across the country who help support locally tailored approaches to community safety challenges. Today we'll learn about CPTED theory and its relationships to the built environment, and why it's vitally important for consideration by practitioners in the field as they develop neighborhood safety plans. To introduce both of our presenters now, Seville is the founder of Safe Growth, training course in safe design and CPTED. He is a planner specializing in crime prevention and community capacity building. He is the co-founder of the International CPTED Association, co-chair of the Police Society for Problem-Based Learning, and senior partner at Alternation LLC. And Greg will be Ryan Samuelson, who is a coordinator for the Kansas City, Missouri BCJI project. He recently served as the team leader for the city cohort trained in safe growth practice this past summer. Ryan serves as adjunct instructor in criminology and criminal justice at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. With that, I will now turn the discussion over to my good friend, Mr. Greg Seville. Greg.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. Listen, I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to deliver this information on crime prevention to everyone. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Everyone gets today in this session on CPTED for the 21st century. The main points I want to talk to you about today before I turn it over to Ryan, and the general ideas that I want to get across have to do with resources, have to do with the tactics of safe growth, and it has to do with the importance of teams. So those are the three main themes I want to cover today. But before I do that, just to talk about resources, I want to give you information throughout this webinar, places you can go in terms of links online, first to call, website to visit that will help you in your community, wherever you happen to be, whatever you happen to be doing in terms of development and safety and neighborhoods and so forth, that will give you information. So the first thing I want to do is, let's see if here we go. So that's the smiling face there on the bottom, and that's my phone number and email. So you're welcome to please contact me at any point in the future, questions or any thoughts about strategies you're attempting or that you want to attempt, or partners you want to establish with your local police or what have you. I'm a former university professor. I'm what I like to say, a recovering academic, so I still keep my foot in the training environment, and the training world, and the research and academic world. So we have a lot of people who are connected through a vast network who have expertise in all kinds of areas. So please, at any point, should you have any questions, drop me an email or give me a call. All right, three things. Number one, resources. Number two, tactics of safe growth and CPTED. And three, the teams. So the website for you. This is what we developed a number of years ago. On that website, you download articles, you get access to other links to other organizations that are doing this kind of work. This particular website is the Safe Growth Alliance, which is an international group of a couple of dozen people who've been doing this program, have had the training, and are excited and keen to see what works, to try it out for themselves, to that. And so you'll get access through that particular website on the top, safegrowth.org. So please, by all means, use that resource. It's to your advantage. And there are resources we're going to talk about as well. So you should know that CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, if you're wondering what the acronym stands for, was established in the early 70s. Actually came out of a book, early 60s, by Jane Jacobs called Death and Life of Great American Cities, and a number of other architectural studies that were done, and doctoral thesis out of Berkeley, and sort work that was done in the 60s, which turned into a book in the 70s called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, shortened acronym CPTED, CPTED. And the 1970s version of that has to do with reducing crime opportunities, modifying the physical environment. That's the gist of it. It's established. It's been around a long time. There's all kinds of studies on evaluating how effective it works. It has tons of resources. There's training everywhere in your state, in your region. We obviously run training through LISC, through the safety folks there who've been doing this for about 9 years now. You can find more about that by talking to the moderator and so forth. There's a lot of information, training, and resources available to you there. CPTED isn't today what it was before. It's morphed into other forms of CPTED. One form that started in the late 90s is called second generation CPTED, which has to do with looking at the social motives of crime at the local site where you're doing any kind of development, adding that to the opportunity reduction strategies. And second and first generation go together, as you'll see in a minute. And the latest evolution of that story is the safe growth planning model, which is the slide you see in front of you right now. So that's the gist of the first main points. And the second main points has to do with teamwork, and to do that, we use this metaphor tree. We have a philosophy that we've found works successfully in crime prevention work, called the 2-4-width theory. How it works basically is, if you think of an image of a tree where you have the branch at the top with the leaves, parts you see most readily, and of course the stalk of the tree and the various branches hold the leaves up, and then the roots that feed that at the bottom under the ground. What we discovered in prevention and in safety is responses to crime. It happens at 3 different levels. It happens at the surface. That is, we have strategies that happen immediately, or police respond to a crowd of robberies at a corner store, and they flood the area and make an arrest, and they have a criminal justice system, and there's a court system, and so forth. So kind of a surface response to crime. Or perhaps they install cameras where there's been bank robberies or something like that, or install lights. An initial response that's kind of immediate, necessary, but surface. Underneath that, there's another set of strategies that have to do with something that's a little more fundamental. That is, maybe the residents will get together and establish a program, like a neighborhood watch program, to have folks keep an eye for each other. That's a little more detailed, a little more thorough, and then ultimately there's a third level, which is the things that really fundamentally try to reform or redevelop and revitalize neighborhoods from the bottom. And that's the roots of the tree. And the strategies we employ to those 3 levels are called the 2-4-width strategies. How they work is strategies and tactics you apply to crime or to neighborhoods can happen at 3 different levels based on those 3 different parts of the tree. They happen to neighborhoods, where you have a program that's done to a neighborhood, it's brought in, whether they know it or not. You bring it in, and you say, okay, here's a great strategy, we've tried it. It's parents programs where you have signs and have neighborhoods meet each other to try to help children in trouble and so forth. That's one level of programs. Another is doing things for the neighborhood. That is, they say, we've had some burglaries, we'd like the police to come in, help us set up a neighborhood watch. And the police go in and do it for them, help them teach them how to do the program, set up the signs and so forth, and then kind of deliver it in that format. We tend to do nowadays, once the programs that have the greatest sustainability, the ones that have the greatest impact, are the ones where we work directly with the community and have communities develop programs by themselves or in collaboration and in partnership with us. The two with is one of the key strategies for making sure that safety strategies last in the long run. The ones that don't have that sort of local ownership and local buy-in tend not to last, or at least they tend not to be as effective. Or they may be really effective for 4 or 5 or 6 months, but within a year or two, things tend to go back to normal or back to the crime problems you started with. So the goal with is a philosophy we use in our development work. It's critically important, and I'll show you how it plays out in real life. So keep that, because that's an important theory. All right, example. Here we've got dozens of cases around the United States and around Canada and other parts of the world where we've done this work, and we've applied it in small neighborhoods because our strategy is small is beautiful. We work small and go up, as opposed to citywide strategies. That's just our approach. So in the neighborhood, we did some work, and after the famous Hurricane Katrina disaster in New Orleans in 2005, neighborhoods in New Orleans had been plagued by guns and by drugs and by gangs, and this neighborhood here, called the Holly Grove neighborhood, was no exception. You can see some of the early photographs of the abandoned buildings. I think there was about 3,000 or 4,000 residents in this area, a couple thousand homes, and many of the homes were donated even before the storm, abandoned and condemned. And so you had a neighborhood that was in great trouble, a lot of strife. There was a lot of gang issues with shootings and violence and so forth. The gangs preyed on the residents, and this had been well known as a crime neighborhood in the city. Lil Wayne actually wrote a lot of his songs about this area. He's from that neighborhood back in the day. And so, you know, this was an area that was well known as a crime hotspot in the city of New Orleans. And they came forward. One of the team members who initiated the strategies in this particular case was a group called ARP, who you may know as the folks who do retirement planning. And one of their latest strategies has to do with livability and walkability. And of course, you can't have either of those unless you have a safe neighborhood. So their strategies were to go to Holly Grove, to work with residents, to strategize and come up with tactics to turn the neighborhood into something a little more safe, to get residents more engaged, and so on and so forth. And developed a livability strategy, which one of the first things we did was safe growth and CPTED training. And along the way, we got the residents in teams, and we started to look at analyzing and diagnosing the problems, because you can't a problem unless you diagnose what the problem is first. So it's kind of like diagnosis pre-prescription. What happens in too many crime prevention programs is we do it the other way around. We say, oh, we have dinner downtown, let's install some cameras. We don't really analyze what the problem is. Holly Grove, using this safe growth and CPTED strategy, that's the first thing we did. We talked to the residents, we had focus groups, we had surveys. Here we're looking at some crime mapping using some geographic information, computer maps. We mapped out the side locations in this particular case, shooting locations rather. In the particular case, I think it was 2000 and maybe 6 or 7. We had about 20 or 25 shootings in the span of a year, and those blue lines are the bus stop locations. If you look carefully, you'll see that in the low there may in fact be correlations between the bus stop locations and where shootings are happening, whereas over here there isn't. One of the things we have our teams look at is why is it happening there and not there? What is it about that particular environment? Are there things to do with the street, to do with the layout, to do with the lighting? And so that's the first thing we did. And of course, when we went to the street to get a closer look at some of our analysis, that's what some of the bus stops look like, which we, of course, no place that anybody wants to stand in the day, certainly not at night, but you know, when the buses were infrequent, there was long periods we had to stand and wait. The sidewalks were in utter disarray, graffiti was everywhere, and so on. So one of the first strategies the teams did was to think about how do we make our neighborhoods safer, take ownership of our street by creating our own bus stops or a bus stop that we can be proud of. And so together with some of the local architecture students and the seniors and some of the local police and other groups like that who sat in the teams, the safe road teams, they decided to design their own bus stop and their own based on the local history, something that looked like theirs, something history as part of their culture, something that had local recycled materials, and something they could be proud of. And this bus stop's been in the neighborhood for about 8 years now. Very few problems with graffiti because, of course, it's their bus stop. I mean, they own it. The other issues with the bus stop that are beyond the scope of this seminar that we could talk about in more detail later, but that was kind of important because it was a first step. It was an initial foray into not only building a place that can activate a dead space on a street, we have a phrase we call placemaking, where you try to make a place interesting, engaging, lively, bring a lot of the local folks who are legitimate, residents in the neighborhood to take up of it and actually participate in it, and it can make an area much safer. And a bus stop like this is one way to do that. Something was we did social programming, the traditional night out against crime or crime walks that are nationwide once a year. We had one in Holly Grove, although there was very sparsely attended. Nowadays, there's dozens and hundreds of people who come out and participate and are part of this. And the whole point to that is to get folks to know each other, to build the cohesion in the neighborhood, what sociologists call the collective efficacy. Try to do this in a powerful way so that folks know each other, so they know how to call each other when they need something done or to mow somebody's lawn. The lawns were unmowed and the property owners were absent and vacant, so the residents themselves started to take actions to clean things up and try to make a difference. This is another one. This was a daytime walkabout that started with some of the seniors. One in particular called Miss Ruthie was very active in trying to not to walk for health purposes, but also to socialize. And so Miss Ruthie started a program called the Soul Steppers, which started as a small group of half a dozen or so, which gradually evolved into 40, 50, 60 people walking the neighborhood as members of the community. And such powerful and successful story of neighborhood revitalization that it started to spread to other neighborhoods across New Orleans, and showing how you can transform a neighborhood from one thing to another. Here's an interesting thing that happened with lighting, because we couldn't get the money in the city to install new sets of lights back in the day. So what happened was the residents themselves decided, well, we need light in a particular abandoned house, this one area that was very old, and there were no lights. It was dark. So the residents themselves, now keep in mind, this is a impoverished neighborhood where folks don't have a lot of money. They fundraised themselves because they had been working together with social and cultural programs. They knew each other. So they raised themselves and got money to buy a spotlight, install themselves on their own. Of course, not to code, I'm sure, but the key is it showed the community and it showed the city that we want something done. And of course, eventually, they did get resource support, and eventually they had new street lights installed. And this is a Kaboom Park that was installed for the kids. Areas of the abandoned homes were cleaned up, and eventually the neighborhood transformed. Here's a center next to a garden center. The architecture students set up this little pavilion. They have a garden growth season where they have all kinds of fruits and vegetables that are sold to the city at large now. So there's resources and there's funds being developed for the community and local and area. So it's transformed the city. Here's some of the stats as of last year. You can see the shootings are dropping from an average of 15 to 4. I don't think we had even that last year. So the crime is reducing, the ownership in the neighborhood is increasing, and things are getting much better. So how does Safe Growth do that, and what do we do? So there are 4 steps that we employ using this particular model. Before the CPTED, before we start putting lights in, before we start trimming, doing any of the physical stuff, we discovered that to really focus on the 2-4 width, to work with folks, you must establish some of the teams. You must establish some of the local cohesion. That's what has to precede the other steps. So here's how we do it. The first thing is we have teams set up. Sometimes they're called panels. Sometimes they're called leadership teams. They have a combination of a number of players involved. Of course, the police are usually participants. The local control officers, sometimes the crime prevention, certainly the crime analysis, because we need data to do. Have the residents, of course, any local organizations in this case, the local faith community and the churches played a big role. As a matter of fact, one of the ministers who was active, Kevin Brown, was very about making sure that they shut down some of these drug houses, and they really some of the bars that were triggered a lot of the shootings. And so Kevin got keen on doing the second generation CPTED concepts that he actually went back to school to do a doctorate, and he just graduated with a doctorate in neighborhood revitalization, talking in his PhD thesis of the power of the second generation model to transform a neighborhood at the University of New Orleans in the Urban Studies program. So we've had tremendous results from this team approach. That's the first step. And the Safe Growth class that we run with LISC, we have two up front of preliminary training, established teams. The team go out into the community for a couple of months to do work. Then they come back for another 2-day follow-up in the LISC training, and they present their plans. And the plans can have many different angles to them. They can be CPTED based, or they can be planning bicycle trail based. I mean, they can be based on anything. The key is that they have a roadmap for where they are now, what the conditions are now, the strategies they want to employ, and most important of all is in 12 months from now or 18 months from now, where they're going to be, the destination, and some kind of a measurable where they can say, here's how we're going to determine whether we're successful or not. And that can be anything determined by the team itself. It can be a reduction in crime. It can be fewer burglaries. It can be 10% fewer burglaries, or 60% fewer acts of graffiti, or 50% increase in the activity in the park, or what have you. But the plan is key, because if you don't have a roadmap to tell your destination is supposed to look like, you're not going to know whether or not you're being successful. You may think you are anecdotally, but you're really going to have no way to make it scientific. And above all, the whole point of neighborhood planning, reinvestment, and safe growth is to make it somehow systematic, coherent. So you have learn what you did right, what you did wrong, and you have a roadmap to the next level. So we teach the whole idea of safe growth roadmaps and safe growth plans and so forth at neighborhood level, not the city level. It's local. Third step is the key to local partnerships. And we don't just mean partnerships in your city with your local planners or with the local police. We also mean partnerships nationwide. There's a number of organizations. Obviously, the one that I have a lot of affection for, have seen a lot of success with, is the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, who's sponsoring this webinar today, who have a safety program. John obviously can tell you more about that. The National Network for Safer Communities, they do anti-gang strategies through Kennedy's work, and there's a number of organizations. We encourage the reaching out aspect of bringing in experts so you don't reinvent the wheel. So the multi-agency partnerships is a really important part of the story. Livability academies. This is the latest strategy we've developed, which is to sustain members on the panels on an ongoing basis. We have one evening a week for 8 weeks. We bring in speakers and people. It's a social event, so residents come voluntarily. It's free, and that builds a repertoire. It builds a cohort in the neighborhood and in the community of people who have the same language. Sometimes having the same terms and language can go a long way to get folks to work together. Those are our 4 steps. Now we do the tactics. So the main thing we start with is CPTED, both social CPTED and physical CPTED. CPTED, prevention through environmental design, has 3 different categories: first generation basic, second generation advanced on the right, and the second generation. So let me give you some examples. Okay, CPTED, crime prevention through design. In the early years, the whole concept was based on the control of space, the ownership of space, what architect Oscar Newman used to call defensible space. And this is access control, controlling areas into and out of parks, for example, with bridges and boom gates for vehicles into parking lots, and key access control into apartment buildings. Natural surveillance, that is the ability to see and be seen, have clear sight lines. We use strategies like hedging and landscaping and improved lighting and so forth. Image maintenance, this is a strategy that came from the 60s. It was basically about clearing areas up and removing graffiti and so forth. And then the title at the top, which is territoriality or territory control, which is establishing places for folks to take pride in. So, for example, the bus stop in Holly Grove was an example of that. The example of natural surveillance, here's lighting. Lighting is a big part of our story. We spend time showing our classes how to look to lighting, what kind of lighting, how much lighting to install, how not to overlight areas. Sometimes you don't want to light areas. Lighting in parks has become a big thing, particularly the West Coast, Los Angeles in the last number of years, to try to improve the sight lines into nighttime parks and so forth. Another example of natural surveillance, this is in Portland, Oregon, where we're trying to reduce not only the theft of bicycles. Nowadays bicycles can be thousands of dollars, and parking them all over the city makes them vulnerable to theft. So what they're here is creating what's called a bike call, that is bollards where bicyclists park their bikes. Also locate the bike parking areas next to a coffee shop, where the bikers themselves will go and have coffee and watch their own bikes, thereby putting eyes onto the street and reducing the opportunity for theft of the bicycle. Very simple strategy, didn't take a lot of money, and cuts bicycle theft rates. Territory control, sometimes you can use very small strategies to make an area look like it's lived, like it's loved. A little bit of TLC can go a long way with art and culture and murals and philosophy and so forth. And here's an example where the owners of these two places are trying to create the area between their spaces as something that's beautiful, and although it shows that this belongs to them, it's their space. Yes, you can step over the fence easily, but the likelihood of that has been almost zero over the last 10 years that this facility has been constructed. A park that's in this particular case that's been abandoned, is litter there. It looks like nobody cares about it. This was a drug dealing location, and some of our list groups there, actually this was a list project where we did Safe Growth and CPTED. What they had to do was to activate the space with social programming, to make it a night where the kids could go out, and people started to take this over by cleaning it up and cleaning the wall and getting the graffiti off it, making it a move rejection area and so forth. So there's many strategies that by working with the Safe Growth plans and with the teams, you can transform areas that were once crime into something that's much, much more livable. Set of strategies. Second generation. This is the cohesion and the cultural, social connections and uses and so forth. A couple quick examples. Here's making strategies where you want to make an intersection lively and engaging. In this particular case, I think it was a young who was struck by a car. This is Portland, Oregon, where they decided to activate their intersections with a program that they call the repair program, which is neighborhoods out to paint the, work with the traffic department to make it beautiful, put in T stations and so forth. In other words, residents are taking ownership, have a place to go in the neighborhood. I stood there for an hour. Every car that drove by came to a full stop, although there was no stop signs there. So there's strategies you can do to make things fair. We did the same sort of thing in Rochester, New York, had the residents, and particularly the kids are such a big factor in transforming areas. The kids themselves, not only placemate, but just getting together to work as a team and to get to know names and so forth in the neighborhood. These strategies can help build some cohesion. Taking with outside groups. This is Melbourne, Australia, where they decided to take a look at graffiti, and realized that instead of removing, they went the opposite way. They decided when they were turning Melbourne into a nighttime city about 20 years ago, they decided that the laneways could paint out the laneways, but it was a losing proposition because they got dozens and dozens of laneways. It's a large, big city in Melbourne. So what it said was the opposite. They contacted and worked with some of the graffitiists, some of the street artists, and they decided to make some laneways graffiti friendly. And not only did it take off, it exploded. I mean, everybody wanted to go there and paint up. And so the lanes and the alleys actually became places where people started to hang out. There are buskers there, as you can see, playing music. There's restaurants put their tables there. There's the tour organizations in Melbourne actually bring tours to the laneways to show, they call laneway tour programs to the local artists. By connecting with the outside world and making it something that's an asset, not a liability, you can help to reduce crime. So this is I'm going to ask some of my team here to participate. So I want you to take a look at this. Based on all the things I've said about urban design and about safety and so forth, this public housing project, I won't tell you where it is. It doesn't really matter. This is quite ubiquitous as a design. I'm my friend, my friends here on the team with Russ, John, and Julia, take a look at this. And what I want you to do is I want you to see, what do you think about this? What's your sense of this? Give me some feedback. How do you see this, John?
So from a territorial standpoint, I'm a little concerned with this in a sense that I don't really know where the public space is and where transition maybe is to semi-private and private space. So kind of an understanding of who controls what in this photo is a little difficult.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so territoriality, but access control. I don't know that I'd want to live in that house that has the window just open to the parking lot like that.
Right. Yeah, and you have a very common design you see in many public housing projects. Julia, as walking through this area, particularly at nighttime, what are your responses?
Yes, just walking down that pathway, I would feel like sitting in that person's living room who has the window there. So are they looking out at me, and should I be looking in at them? And the area with the stairwell seems a little risky to me. If it was dark, I'm not sure I would feel so comfortable.
Are you talking about this area right here? Can you see my cursor there?
No move, but straight ahead to the path, the stairs coming down.
Yeah. Right. Not only that, but if you look a bit closer to it, there's actually an entranceway to the left that goes off to the left, but it actually is a full entrapment area where you can see nothing down there, and at least the perception of someone lurking there at night, I would imagine, engenders some fear. Is that right?
That corner.
Right. Well, okay. Thank you, team. What I want to let you know about is this is in fact a real building, a real property, and I was called to do an investigation after shooting, and the shooting took place right through that window, and the shooter was a gang member who was looking for a person, and the court had easy access to the site because the fencing was open, and they felt comfortable there and could walk there because it's a no man's land. There's no what we call territorial control in that space there at all. Although there's clear sight lines, there's no actual eyes there to see except for through the window where the young woman was shot. What do you do about that? Well, there's all kinds of architectural strategies. Here's a strategy where we're trying to reinforce territorial control using architectural design by having the sidewalk on one side, creating a buffer where those small trees are. It's a fall time shot, as you can see, and then a small fence that wouldn't stop anyone from jumping it. You could put a hard fence there, tall chain fences, but chain link tends to be quite ugly and detracts actually from the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I mean, you don't really need that a lot of times because in this case you can demarcate the inside space with the outside space. As a matter of fact, just inside the fence there, you'll see that there are leaves are all collected. So it's already been picked up, so it gives the environmental cue that someone cares about that space. And of course, as you move closer, there are windows up top that can look down and so forth. So, place is crime-free forever. No guarantee of anything, but can make places far more safe by being designed properly, by working with the residents, and by getting teams established to help turn neighborhoods around. So, my sort of summary of what we're doing in our work. And there's my phone number again. Please contact us as you wish, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, the LISC folks are doing that as well. So, John, back over to you.
Appreciate it. So we're going to transition now to hear from Ryan Samuelson, again, the coordinator with the KCBI project, and he's going to talk just a little bit about how he and his team in the community there have implemented some of the things that Greg has spoke about relative to both CPTED and safe growth work. So Ryan, take it away.
Hey everybody. Along with Bree, we were fortunate enough to kind of have some cohesion before we went through our safe growth training. We, in Kansas City, were the recipients of a burn grant that worked with PD and the local community to reduce violence and build collective efficacy. So we had quite a bit of stakeholders at the table. We called ourselves the Community Response Team, and we had leaders and members of these different neighborhood associations. We had buy-in from a number of governmental institutions, and out of this group we began working to reduce crime and build collective efficacy. Now, the safe growth approach really helped our team. Through the first year of the BCJI, we took on quite a number of endeavors, and we didn't exactly have our focus tailored down. As you can see, the diversity of our group here, everyone kind of had different priorities, and we worked as we could to get quick victories and to get our momentum moving forward. And kind of right when we were being pulled in a number of directions, we, with our partners at LISC, decided to go to San Antonio for the safe growth training. So we had already established as a group our vision for community safety, that we wanted to use a problem-solving process to help build collective efficacy. We did a bit of surveying of our community, and we had 3 priorities that we wanted to tackle, and that was addressing vacant properties, beautifying a corridor that was central to our workspace, and attracting jobs and businesses. So out of this kind of framework, we took a team to San Antonio with 2 different neighborhood association presidents, one member of the Kansas City Land Bank, which is an entity that manages vacant properties in Kansas City. We had members of the Kansas City Police Department and myself serving as a committee organizer. And we approached this through the lens of an initiative we were beginning to flow out called Taking Care of Prospect. So while I mentioned we had such a diverse group of stakeholders at the table, Prospect is the corridor that kind of unified everyone, that ran right to the heart of our focus area. And we were already beginning to have success with collective efficacy in the sense that we were identifying problems together and working together to solve said problems. So when we decided to take the safe growth training, we thought we would focus on a particular hot spot along Prospect Avenue at 35th Street that has a couple liquor stores at this intersection, some vacant lots, a deteriorating pocket park, some taco outlet stores, and it was one of the areas that PD had identified as well as having the highest calls for service, but most of our community members were also very aware of the problems facing that area. So after our safe growth training, we developed an initial plan attack, and we returned to Kansas City with a lot of energy, and we started out by surveying our residents. We wanted to follow up on the vision for community safety that we had already established, and we did some neighborhood safety audits where we would visit 35th and Prospect during the day, later in the afternoon, in the evening, on the weekends, in the morning. So I think we ran 5 safety audits all together where we did site visits and we did field interviews. And many of the people who frequent in this area were familiar with us from doing cleanups before, but they were kind of one-dimensional, and so we were still working to build cohesion and connectivity amongst our team, but also to invite the people who actually occupied that area. So the first success we had was with our Take Care of Prospect community cleanup. We originally only set out to physically clean up the area, but after our safe growth training, we decided to invite social service partners to come with us so that many of the people that were suffering from alcohol problems or were participating in prostitution, we could try to get some social services there and begin to build trust. What we actually found is that many of these people continued to come out and help with the cleanups as we made further dates and had a continuation of these events. An initial initiative we took on was the multifamily housing engagement. There was a apartment complex catty corner to the intersection we were working at where there was a lot of incidences of violence and a number of hand-to-hand drug transactions. And so we used kind of the same approach. In the past, we had been doing more of a 2 and 4 approach, where we had ideas ourselves and we decided that we could bring those ideas to people and do things for people. But after the safe growth training, we focused more on doing things with people, with the inevitable goal of having these things done by the people. And so the multifamily housing engagement came out of the people from the cleanups who came out and helped out. Many of the people that PD was in a bit of arresting, and instead we invited them to the table and we got a lot of rewards out of them. And this thing happened at this multifamily housing unit where we almost eliminated all incidences of violence, and we were helping connect people to job training programs, and we saw a lot of success out of that. So some people that we were working with gain a lot more perspective into their lives, especially the neighborhood association presidents and the police were really kind of shocked to learn more about prostitution and what led people to this lifestyle. And again, when you're working with the people, it really creates a lane to get a lot more done and to focus resources more strategically instead of doing what we thought to be done to people and for people. They were the ones solving their problems, and we could help connect them to resources to get this done. So we've had a number of initiatives come out of this safe growth training along those same lines. One that we're really proud of is the Urban Canvas initiative. We have an abundance of vacant homes on the east side of Kansas City, and we, with our nominal budget at the community response team level, engaged Kansas City's Park and Rec and an arts training group that nearly doubled our investment in the project and took youth through an 8-week training program. We've now done it for 2 summers. They would design boards to be put on vacant homes. And then when we were drafting this, that was our idea. But then working with the youth and community members, it went a step further, and we began to think about how to help get community aware that these houses were actually for sale, and for sale for very cheap, and to begin working at kind of restoring these houses as well as decorating them with art. And we have since really galvanized this Urban Canvas program to get 4 or 5 different vacant homes sold around the 35th and Prospect area. And this has kind of parlayed into the Ready to Hire job training and placement program, where we get a bit of capital up front and we train people that are underemployed to just do minor home repairs, addressing the porches and some of the external parts of the home. And then when the community saw work being done to these houses, we generated a lot more interest, and we found families that were looking to buy these places. Addressing blight with light and the creative placemaking initiatives as well have taken on a number of roles outside of this pointed safe growth area, and it's beautiful to see kind of these ideologies, especially the with and by perspectives of doing things instead of just 2 and 4 people, be taken up around the city in other places. The community painting murals on walls around vacant lots with the police department, similar to some of the pictures that Greg showed earlier, painting at intersections where we have instances of people driving too fast while kids are waiting for the bus. And so we've really seen this safe growth perspectives kind of take a life of their own, and we've had it influence larger institutions. So 311 is the way that you call and kind of report problems in your neighborhoods that the city responds to. And so we've begun partnering with the city to address blight and to help the community solve their own problems. Again, the land bank adoption, lease, and purchase programs have been a huge success. And throughout our successes, we just invite more neighborhoods to the table and listen to their concerns and challenges, and it has kind of become quite sustainable and has a lot of inertia itself. Kind of example of one of the cleanups we did, this vacant home was having people break in to abuse drugs, and same thing when we when we thought we would just cut down the foliage and help the police, better sight lines, we actually found out that one of the gentlemen who's living at this house was a diabetic, and so we were able to garner trust with him by helping him get some clean needles and get to some resources he needed. And you see the little blue sign there. We mark our work with the Care of Prospect thing, and we've said to have people from the community call us and talk about places that they want to see us do work. And it has been a great benefit to our city, and has really galvanized the community response team to look to sustain themselves longer than the burn grant supports them. So a lot of results, I think, are really speak to the power of the safe growth training, especially the focus on community police collaboration, identifying problems together and working through those problems together has been a great success of ours, along with the connecting neighborhoods along Prospect and working with Land Bank to address the vacant houses. So with that, I will pass it back to John.
Thank you much, Ryan, and thank you, Greg. We're now at the question and answer portion of our session. So again, invite folks to put questions in the text box found in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. But before we get to that, just a quick resource list of some websites for those interested in learning more about CPTED and the work that was discussed today. And I do see that there was one question already about being able to get a copy of this presentation. It is being recorded and will be archived on List Safety's BCGI website in the near future, and so it will be available to participants down the road in just a bit. And so with that, I don't know if there are questions from the audience, but I could kick it off by maybe having a question to both Greg and Ryan. I appreciate your insights and your discussion today. And maybe for you, Greg, first, you noted that there are a number of cities across the country and even internationally that are engaged in this type of work. For those that are participating in this webinar and just learning about CPTED for the first time, what would be recommendations for how teams or neighborhoods that are interested in learning more on this, what are kind of initial first steps?
The simplest one is simply they need to contact you and contact Julia. That's because you've been doing this for a number of years. You have a successful track record of going to neighborhoods, helping with revitalization, running these trainings, and so forth. So that's my first, the obvious solution to that. The various web links that I provided on my part there, please go there. I mean, there's all kinds of information on doing it yourself, using resources, and also talking to folks who have done this before and getting, like Ryan, who actually have some experience. So, that would be my second step if I was somebody looking to do that. Many of the communities who are in this webinar right now already have had projects they may not even know about. So we're doing right now in Philadelphia is we're linking them all together. We're creating a network of neighborhoods so that neighborhoods learn from each other, have regular meetings, and so forth. So we have governance already, but we just don't have neighborhood governance, and this is one way to get started. So that's my two suggestions.
Thank you.
Ryan? Respond to some of the questions that I see popping up here. Ben asks what government office I worked out of. I was actually hired on to be the community organizer for the Burn Grant, and I was housed out of the prosecutor's office, which at the time also housed KC Nova, our No Violence Alliance. So I was in close proximity to some of the detectives working on the Burn Grant, and really close to City Hall, so that I kind of became a champion for the community to help them get inroads into some of these hard-to-navigate institutions. But yeah, to answer your question, John, I think that taking account of all stakeholders and getting kind of a centralized concern, it was a lot easier when we agreed to focus on one intersection. As Greg pointed out, start small and let your work show the possibilities of what can be done. And from then on, it was really just putting together stakeholders and letting people with energy take the lead. And I think once you've kind of identified a unifying project, then it's really easy to look to these safe growth resources to help guide your plan.
Great. then about a particular city that has a comprehensive plan happening now that includes redevelopment of housing units that sit in their target. How do we align the BCHI efforts with that work? And I think I open that up, including Julia, if you'd like, for responses on that.
Sure. And do you want to start with how you integrated this work with the broader NOVA strategy?
NOVA, it uses a social network analysis to identify people that are likely to be victims or perpetrators of violent crime, and they message people and try to get them connected with social services before they have to use traditional law enforcement tactics. So NOVA was actually the recipient of the Burn Grant, and worked along their kind of guiding principles to message the community and show them that law enforcement was interested in another way of solving problems. And the community response team was that acting body of grant, and it really took on a life of its own. PD was very receptive to what the community thought should be done, and the community was able to learn law enforcement sensitivities, and I speak to the power of identifying a problem together. And when both parties are working towards the same ends, you learn about each other, about how each other's institutions work, the challenges that these neighborhood associations face every day, as well as law enforcement's, restrictions and where they work and stuff. So I hope that answers your question. BCI has, through LISC, connected us to a number of resources, and the Safe Growth training was one of those.
I just did that, if I might. It's Greg here. That's a really great question. You link in with initiatives already underway, other plans, other environmental strategies. My first comment is to the teams. Whenever they get started, is to go to the planning office. The planners will know what a lot of these plans are. They're behind them, monitoring them. They have review committees and so forth. They have that's their job, is to keep their fingers into what's happening where. You need the planning department into your strategies. They're a critical player here. And the second thing is, in the Safe Growth strategy, we insist that the neighborhoods themselves have their own plan. It's great to tap into other environmental strategies that are going on. For example, the Rails to Trails programs that are happening in parts of California right now, where they're taking abandoned lines and turning them into bicycle trails. That's a great strategy. There'll be a plan that is laying out the steps to do that. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be safety or crime prevention tactics embedded in that. It may be by default, but it won't be on purpose. And so neighborhoods themselves, through this Safe Growth planning, need their own plan with specific tactics or laid out with specific guidelines, and then that's what gets tapped into and collaborated with those other plans. So it's kind of like a two-step process, but the whole plans in the neighborhood, that's a critical step.
Do we have any other questions from attendees?
A theme to some questions that maybe I'll try to summarize. It just seems a lot of people are really interested in the resources that it might take to make this happen. I think both in terms of staffing and in terms of projects. Can either of you speak to kind of the low-hanging fruit or the bigger picture of where people should think about lining up money and personnel to help get this going?
We were fortunate to be the Burn Grant recipient, again, which denoted some funds be allotted to the community to solve problems with. However, we're in our second year of that grant, and we have really spent very little of that budget. It was, and continue to be impressed with how many resources we can get simply by knowing that we're going to put the work in and that we'll be the boots on the ground. When we want to do community cleanup, the city partners with us and donates dumpsters. When we need more brute labor, we partnered with the Sentence Serve group here. That's the Metropolitan Community Service group, and we get a lot of people out there who are working off their community service, and any of those people are from the communities that we're working in. We can come in the list to make sure that they are. I think leveraging the stakeholders that are already existing in your city and provide them with some fresh energy can go a long way.
To that, the level that I have seen in communities that are successful doing this is they tend to spend a bit of time before they get started and lay out a strategy, a political and a fundraising strategy. And it turns out that there's all kinds of things that are available right now in communities that are that they don't even know about or don't know they can tap into. So, for example, the two national organizations that I've mentioned in my presentation, LISC and the groups you're talking to right now, and AARP down in the south, those were groups that are already doing things. And there are communities that have those chapters in their communities that don't even know about that. And so I would start there. Again, I would go to the city planners because they tend to tap into a lot of this stuff all the time. But also beyond all that is we have that neighborhood teams are very resourceful in finding out, corporate philanthropists in their community who can work with police organizations. For example, they're engaged in problem policing, or POP is known. They get grants through the COPS office in Washington. The Department of Justice has grants set up for that. Byrne is obviously a version of that. There are other fields that do this kind of raising and investment. So, for example, health and CDC have strategies on obesity, walkability. That ties into safety as well. Because you can't redevelop a neighborhood successfully unless it's safe. And so there are other organizations outside of justice and outside the crime world in housing, in development, and in health and so forth, also have a vested interest in this, and we need to tap into them too.
Great. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I see that we're bumping up toward the end of our allotted time. So I want to thank my senior colleague, Julia Ryan, for providing assistance on today's webinar. And I also want to thank our presenters, Greg Seville and Ryan Samuelson, and thank all of you for your attendance and participation. I feel like today was a great discussion. I want to extend best wishes to everyone for a great holiday season. And I believe that now we are concluded. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Take care.